Hello, this is Jennifer Marshall from Splendid Sourdough. Oops, my glasses were going to fall. I am outdoors today. I'm in the north of Malta. It's very a beautiful area just behind Rabat. My mum had bought this field quite a few years ago and has been working on it and developing into sort of like a pesticide-free area, which is fantastic. So it's where we have a lot of olive trees, and we get peaches in the summer and lots of oranges and lemons. So it's really beautiful. And we do come here for our kind of recreation. My children have half term this weekend, so it's a long weekend for us. And so anyway, today we spent the day here. We go cycling a lot in the area, so it's really nice. On top of that, I asked the question a few days ago about sourdough starter. Who needs help with sourdough starter? And it's clear that there's still a lot of people on this page that need guidance with how to make a good gluten-free sourdough starter and how to make it active. And so what I did this morning before we came here is I prepared some flours and made sure I had a sterilized jar, a clean jar to bring with me. And so, you know, with the idea of recording day one of how to make a sourdough starter. Basically, there are so many ways of actually making a sourdough starter, a gluten-free sourdough starter. I follow basically the principles, similar principles of making a wheat sourdough starter. However, if you watch other videos or YouTubes of other bakers, they're probably going to have a slightly different method because there are so many methods to make sourdough starter. It's just that we are all aiming at the end of the day to make an active starter. So my method will obviously be different to someone else's, and the most important is that you follow one method. To try and mix 2 or 3 different methods will confuse it. So I would suggest get one method and follow it. And then there are ways to boost the starter if it doesn't act the way you would like it to. One thing that I would like to say before I even start is that when you make sourdough starter and when you are working with fermentation, you need to be super patient. And this is what I'm finding with people who I work with when they do my course, my gluten-free sourdough course. I find that people are not patient enough and they expect their starter to react within 2 or 3 days. And if there is no reaction, they start getting really nervous about it, that something is not right, and so on and so forth. With fermentation and with sourdough starter, sometimes it takes about 10 to 12 days, especially even more so in gluten-free flours, to see any kind of activity. So patience is key. I cannot stress this enough. Patience is key. Sourdough teaches us one main aspect apart from many other aspects, but that one main aspect is to be patient, and patience is key because the way my sourdough starter will act from today onwards will probably be quite different to the way your starter will act. It's just I'm showing you a method, and then you have to also look at your ambient temperature, look at the humidity, whether your house is cold, where you are where you are storing your starter is warm enough. So there are so many aspects to it. I can give you a basis, and I tell you that this is the case with most other videos of other bakers. They're going to give you the method, but you have to be the judge of what's happening around your ambience. So you know, whether your starter is being stored in the kitchen or in the pantry or in a cupboard or wherever. There are a few tips I will give you over the next few days as to how to store a starter so it sort of you help it react a little bit faster. But that does not mean that you're going to have a starter that reacts in a day or 2. Starters and fermentation take time to react, so that's really important. So one question I asked on my post was, after so many people were responding saying they need help with the starter, was which flours do you like to work with, or which flours do you prefer? And it's quite clear that most people have said that they have rice flour, either brown rice flour or white rice flour. And I think a few people also mentioned sorghum and also buckwheat. So I looked in my pantry and I had white rice flour and I had buckwheat readily available. So this is what I brought. With sourdough starter, you can have whichever flours you want. I'm just using perhaps the most popular flours because rice flour is perhaps a flour that we all have, and buckwheat is also quite popular and very easy to find in stores. So having these two flours and making a starter with these two flours is perhaps relatively easy. If you have other flours, they follow exactly the same principle. So don't worry if you don't have white flour or rice flour, or else if you don't have buckwheat, you can substitute. One other item that I would like to say is this, that it's very, very important in sourdough to have scales. Very important to have scales, not to kind of figure it out, measure it. It's good to have scales. Scales are quite an important tool to have in the kitchen anyway. So having scales will help you have it more accurate, let's say. So the way I'm starting today is this. I have a clean jar. Make sure you have a clean, sterilized jar, and that your water is tepid and that it is filtered water. I'm using bottled water because this way we have less perhaps chlorinates and other stuff that, you know, perhaps that can kill our microbes. So either filtered or bottled water would help a lot. Okay, so I'm going to get along and doing this. I've got 50 grams of buckwheat flour and 50 grams of white rice flour, and I'm going to place them in my clean sterilized jar. So here's my buckwheat. This is 50 grams. And I'm also going to place 50 grams of my white rice flour. Now, if you don't want to have buckwheat, it's fine. You can place, for example, 100 grams of white rice flour on its own. Okay, so here we are. Just, you know, mix the two of them. That's it. And the other thing that we're going to be doing is just place 100 grams of water. So we have 50 grams of flour, another 50 grams, so that's 100 grams plus 100 grams of water. So that is a ratio of 1 to 1, equal ratio, and 100 grams of filtered water. Here we are, and just give it a good mix. I have left some of my buckwheat out, but I'm gonna add it in and mix it until you get a texture that looks very muddy-like, or perhaps what I would call a thick yogurt-like texture. And I'm going to add the rest of my buckwheat. Now the thing is this, buckwheat is a heavy flour. It's considered to be a heavy flour. So my starter is going to perhaps take slightly longer to ferment. Now I mix it really well. Make sure that all your flours are super well incorporated, that there's no grains that are left that are not that are sort of not incorporated, they need to be all well mixed. And that's really, it's quite simple really. Mix it really well. I'll show you I'll come near to the camera to show what the texture is like. But if you think of a thick yogurt or mud, or when, for example, we mix sand with water, this kind of texture, we don't want it to be too thin or too watery or too thick. It has to be just kind of in the right consistency, so that also the gases are not escaping. That's one of the reasons. It's a nice texture, so kind of like a thick yogurt texture. I've got buckwheat and rice flour here, and I try not to touch the spoon either, so that I don't mix my own bacteria or microbes from my hands and I transfer them into my flour. I don't want that. I just want this to be its own sort of, you know, make its own colony of microbes. So here we are. And then the next step that I'll do, I'll show it now to the camera. I'll show what texture I've got here. So I don't know if you can see it really well. This is the texture I'm getting. So this is buckwheat and rice flour. Okay, and the next thing what I'll be doing is this. Ooh, I'm going to be in the table. What I'll do is this. I will cover it with my lid, my lid. Just cover it without locking it, without sealing it. You can't seal it. Once you seal it, you've taken away all its air. So you must make sure that the jar is just covered. And the reason why we do it is so that we don't get little, you know, flies or whatever into it, because flies do like it. It starts producing an interesting smell, but perhaps not yet. It's still too early for that. I will leave this in my pantry overnight, and check it tomorrow, and we'll feed it again tomorrow. But I will come again on camera, and we'll video the second day of my starter. The most important is this: to keep it in a warm place, not hot and not cold. It's microbes. What we're doing is we're creating a colony of microbes. They love warmth, a nice simple warmth. So for example, I'm going to give you some ideas. I'll keep on giving you ideas over the next few days. If you, for example, place it in a microwave, so it creates a chamber without no heat or anything, just keep it in the microwave with the closed door. The other possibility is, for example, to place it in an oven with the pilot lamp on. That pilot lamp, the soft warmth of this pilot lamp creates a lovely warmth for our starter. The other possibility is to, for example, wrap it in some cloth, wrap the jar in some warm cloth, you know. So there's so many ideas, but I just keep it, our temperature is getting warmer, so perhaps our ambient temperature is just enough to get the microbes going. You have to kind of be your own judge at this point to decide where to put it. I am not looking at getting my starter active overnight. There is no way it's going to be active overnight. It's going to take me a few days. Buckwheat is a heavy flour, so it's going to take me quite some time. I'll just cover it, as I said, just cover it without, or else the other possibility, what you can do is place a cloth on it and just so that air and oxygen obviously can go in. Okay, so this is my number, day one, not number, it's day one of my sourdough, gluten-free sourdough starter. If you have any questions at this point, do send them to me, it's okay. And I'll be coming back on and showing you what happens on day two and what we do to it on day two. Take care and speak very soon.